The Republicans can see a lot of the same things that Steve Kornacki can see. And tonight, a lot of the Twitter flags are on not just Trump tweets. He's got plenty of flags himself, but on people calling the race and already assigning blame. And that's going on Drudge. It's going on in right-wing circles. And Donald Trump is already trotting out allegations of fraud. So this conversation about disinformation and delegitimizing the kinds of figures that are historic for the very reasons that Joy is articulating is already underway. And anybody who thinks that this isn't the new playbook from Donald Trump's Republican Party is delusional. That disinformation has started. The races haven't been called. We don't know for sure how they're going to end. We don't know who's going to win. But Republicans, Trump allies, are already hedging their bets and beginning the delegitimization of them. And it's a bleak little footnote to what is shaping up to be a night Democrats should feel very deeply optimistic about. But it is the new reality, and it's the new normal. And I think you'll start to hear a lot of questions from Trump and his allies, if they haven't started already, by tomorrow morning. And it's just a reminder that all of these actions have a tail. And Trump's efforts to claim fraud when there was none, this was the most secure election in American history. So said the lifelong Republican in charge of securing it. There was no fraud. There was no legal case. There were 60 cases. Trump lost all of them. But the playbook and the damage and the lies and the efforts to delegitimize these candidates are already underway.
And can I just add to that very quickly?
Please, Joy, you go.
That I think what you're going to see next, unfortunately, and the history of the people who are governing that state right now, and you're going to see it around the country, the idea we're going to have commissions to talk about voter fraud, and it's all focused on these non-white where there's pluralities of non-white voters, places like Fulton County, places like Detroit, places like Milwaukee. You're going to probably see epic attempts at new ways to make it almost impossible for black and brown people to vote. The hurdles are going to get higher, legislatively higher, because we don't even have the full Voting Rights Act to protect the vote. It's the same thing that happened when Barack Obama got elected against all odds as the first black president. The minute that the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act, you saw Republicans go immediately after black and brown voters, and you're going to see it again. I fear that the next legislative session in Georgia will be the same people who are getting lots of hand claps from the media for doing the right thing with Donald Trump, enacting vicious voter suppression laws in places like Georgia.
I was going to say that exact same thing, which is that, I mean, part of the political benefit of always staying on offense, ruthlessly staying on offense, even when you don't have the facts on your side, is that you force other people to accommodate you, to sort of make space for you. And so, if you're Ted Cruz sitting there in the United States Senate thinking about yourself as a potential future president, Donald Trump says, I didn't lose the election was stolen from me. And Ted Cruz decides that he's going to run with that. And how is he going to run with it? He's going to run with it in a way that uses that manufactured crisis in a way that will benefit himself and his party in future ways. And so what Ted Cruz says is, I'm going to object to the seating of the electors because we need a commission to study all these accusations of fraud. Yeah. Well, what is that commission going to conclude? If you take those false accusations of fraud seriously, you're going to come up with some conclusion that voting needs to be made more difficult. And of course, that serves the Republican Party's interests. They've been trying to make it more difficult to vote the entire time that I've been alive and before. But they can turn, whether or not they believe what these fantasies that Trump is spinning about the lizard people and the pedophiles taking his election from him, they can use that manufactured crisis for their own purposes. And you'll see it at the federal level. You'll see it everywhere that Republicans have power. Whether or not they endorse the craziness from the president, they will use what he has stirred up along those lines to enact voter suppressive policies wherever they can. And that's the political science benefit of being ruthless in terms of always staying on offense.
Let me add one more thing, Rachel. That is also the consternation in some conservative circles about the attack on what's happening tomorrow. The attack tomorrow is an attack on the very way of voting that is the only scenario that Republicans ever win the White House, ever, ever, ever. So you want to trash the electoral vote? Go ahead. Because the other scenario is that you'll lose forever. So, at some level, maybe there's something Machiavellian in helping them. I mean, the idea that they're going to trash and lift their leg and desecrate what we do tomorrow, which is really ceremonial. It's part of the process that isn't supposed to be political, isn't supposed to be the kind of crisis that renders all four of us anchoring hours and hours of coverage tomorrow. But it is. Because of Republicans. Yeah. And if they succeed in trashing that, they will never win another presidential election again, ever. Because the only other scenario is the popular vote.
Exactly. And black voters and brown voters, voters of color, hear them. I think they almost feel like they're speaking in a vacuum. But non-white voters, indigenous voters, Asian American voters, Latino voters, black voters have now heard the Republican Party essentially say that no election in which non-white voters make the difference in terms of pushing an election in one direction, that is fundamentally illegitimate, that only Republicans can be elected legitimately, as Jamel Bouie wrote in his piece today. They're essentially saying your votes are invalid on their face. Because you are not white voters, your votes never count, and that we will do everything, including break the Constitution, to make them not count. What do they think that these voters are going to hear down the road as more and more and more voters of color turn 18 and start to vote? How do you think they're going to feel about that? They're condemning themselves, as Nicole just said, they're condemning themselves to a position where they can only enact minority rule through things like the Electoral College. And guess what Democrats are going to do when they have the power and a big enough majority and to get rid of it? The Republicans, in the end, will be responsible for the end of the Electoral College if it ends.
The jujitsu move by the Democrats tomorrow would be like the surprise non-defense against the objections and be like, oh,
do it. Knock yourselves out.
Exactly. Knock yourselves out.
Get rid of the EC.
Joe Biden will be the next president, but you're right. This Electoral College thing, gotta go. That would be the jujitsu move.